Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're talking about something that affects every teenager, parent, and honestly, all of us online. The UK's Online Safety Act. The government says it's designed to make the internet safer, especially for young people. Noble goal, right? But here's the thing. This legislation doesn't actually solve the problems it claims to address. In fact, I'd argue it creates a false sense of security while completely missing the actual solutions. Let's break down why this well-intentioned law falls short, how trivially easy it is to circumvent, and why the real answer lies not in more regulation, but in better education about the realities of pornography and online content. I should mention, my day job is as a full-time web developer, and I understand the technical realities of how the internet actually works. And as someone who also creates sex education content on this channel, I have a unique perspective on both the technical and educational aspects of this issue. This combination gives me insight into why technical solutions alone can't solve what is fundamentally an education problem. This isn't the government's first attempt at age verification for online content. Back in 2017, the Conservative government's Digital Economy Act included similar provisions requiring pornography websites to verify users' ages. In fact, I made a video about it at the time. The implementation was set to begin in July 2019. After multiple delays, however, just as it was about to launch, the government announced a sudden postponement. This wasn't merely a delay, they eventually abandoned the entire scheme in October 2019. Why? The government cited technical challenges and privacy concerns. The exact same issues that plague the current approach. They admitted they couldn't implement the system without creating massive privacy issues for users. But here's where it gets interesting. The High Court later ruled that the government's failure to implement the 2017 measures was unlawful. The case, which was brought by child safety campaigners, essentially forced the government's hand. Therefore, rather than fixing the fundamental flaws in the approach, in 2023, they simply repackaged the same problematic ideas into the Online Safety Act, with minimal improvements to the underlying concept. This historical context is crucial because it shows that repeating the same mistakes. The government already acknowledged that these technical measures were unworkable in 2019, yet here we are again with essentially the same approach, just with more bureaucracy and even broader scope for potential censorship. So what exactly does the Online Safety Act require? In simple terms, it forces websites hosting pornographic content to implement robust age verification to prevent under 18s from accessing it. Sounds reasonable on paper. After all, we don't want young people accessing inappropriate content before they're ready. The problem is the implementation. Currently, websites are using various verification methods, uploading ID documents, credit card checks, facial recognition that supposedly estimates your age, or third-party age verification services. Therefore, adults now face a privacy nightmare. Want to watch legal adult content? Better be prepared to hand over your passport or driving license to websites with questionable security practices, or let some algorithm scan your face, or create yet another account with a third-party service that now knows your viewing habits. And all this creates a massive honeypot of sensitive personal data linked to people's most intimate online activities. What could possibly go wrong? But here's the real issue. Any teenager with basic technical knowledge can bypass these measures in minutes. Let's count the ways. Number one, VPNs. For a few pounds a month, anyone can route their traffic through servers in countries without these restrictions. Click a button and suddenly the website thinks you're browsing from America, Germany, or anywhere else. Number two, you could use a Tor browser, which is free anonymous browsing that masks your location and bypasses most regional restrictions. Or you could use maybe proxy servers, which is another simple-ish workaround that takes minutes to set up. Therefore, we've created a law that inconveniences legitimate adult users, creates massive privacy risks, and does almost nothing to prevent determined teenagers from accessing the content anyway. In fact, I'd argue it's made things worse. By driving young people to use VPNs, Tor and proxies, we're pushing them towards the darker corners of the internet, away from mainstream sites that at least have some content moderation, and towards places with far fewer protections. The teenagers who are the most technically savvy, the ones who can easily bypass these restrictions, are precisely the ones who will end up in these unregulated spaces. Meanwhile, the most vulnerable young people who lack technical skills but might still be protected, but they're also the least likely to seek out the content in the first place. But the fundamental issue isn't access to the content, it's that we're failing to educate young people about what they're seeing. The average age a child first sees pornography in the UK is around 11 years old. That's not because age verification isn't strict enough, it's because content spreads through social channels, messaging apps, and peer sharing that no amount of website verification can prevent. The real harm comes not from seeing the content itself, but from believing that it represents reality. Pornography creates profoundly unrealistic expectations about body image and physical norms, consent and communication, pleasure and satisfaction, and power dynamics and respect. Therefore, the actual solution isn't trying to build a perfect digital wall that will inevitably have holes. It's giving young people the tools to contextualize what they see when they inevitably encounter this content. And that might be when they're an adult. Let's be clear about something. Comprehensive age-appropriate sex education isn't about encouraging sexual activity. It's about preparing young people for the world that they actually live in, not the one which we wish they lived in. But what would an effective education look like? First, it would be honest. It would acknowledge that young people will likely encounter pornography and other sexual content, whether through deliberate searching or accidental exposure. Second, it will explicitly address the gap between pornographic fantasy and healthy reality. Teachers and parents need to have straightforward conversations about how pornography is like an action film, choreographed, edited, and designed for entertainment, and certainly not education. Third, it would focus heavily on consent, respect, and communication. These values are the foundation of healthy relationships, yet they are often completely absent in pornographic content. Fourth, it would start early, not with explicit content, but with age-appropriate discussions about bodies, boundaries, and media literacy that evolve as children grow. Therefore, rather than trying to build higher digital walls that sophisticated users will always find ways to climb, we should be equipping young people with the critical thinking skills to navigate the digital world as it actually exists. Of course, this approach faces significant challenges too. Many parents are uncomfortable with these conversations. Schools face pushback when they try to implement comprehensive sex education. And there's the persistent myth that talking about sex somehow encourages sexual activity, despite research consistently showing the opposite. But these challenges are surmountable. We can provide parents with resources to have these conversations. We can train teachers to address these topics appropriately. And we can look to countries which have successfully implemented comprehensive sex education and seen lower rates of teenage pregnancy and STIs as a result. The irony is that many of the same politicians who push for technical solutions like age verification often resist comprehensive sex education. Yet the evidence overwhelmingly shows that education is far more effective at protecting young people than technical barriers. There's another troubling aspect to legislation like the Online Safety Act that we need to address. The way that some politicians weaponize moral panic to expand censorship powers. Throughout history, protecting children has been used as a justification for all manner of restrictions that go far beyond their stated purpose. The Online Safety Act follows this pattern perfectly. While ostensibly about keeping children away from pornography, the Act contains broadly worded provisions about harmful content that could easily be expanded. We've already seen politicians suggesting that these same mechanisms could be used to restrict access to other types of content they find personally objectionable. Therefore, what starts as protecting children from pornography could evolve into a system where government-approved bodies determine what information adults can access from a wide range of topics. This isn't paranoia, it's a predictable pattern which we've seen with censorship legislation throughout history. First establish the principle and the technical infrastructure using the most sympathetic case possible. I mean, who could be against protecting children? Then gradually expand its scope. But the solution to harmful misinformation isn't centralised censorship. It's better critical thinking skills and media literacy. Once again, education proves more effective than restriction. Let's look at the historical context. We've been here before with other media. In the early 20th century, theatre was heavily censored by the Lord Chamberlain's office. Every play had to be submitted for approval, with any immoral content ruthlessly cut. Films faced similar scrutiny from the British Board of Film Censors, with strict rules about what could be shown. And television was tightly controlled with watershed hours and content restrictions. But over time, we've collectively realised something important. This kind of blanket censorship doesn't work. It infantilises adults and ultimately fails at its primary goal anyway. Therefore, we gradually rolled back these restrictions. The Theatres Act of 1968 ended the Lord Chamberlain's censorship powers. Film classifications evolved from banning content outright to providing information that helps viewers make informed choices. Television developed watershed hours and content warnings rather than outright bans. The pattern is clear. We moved from restriction to education, from saying you cannot see this to here's what you're about to see and you can make an informed choice. But now with the internet, we're regressing to the old failed approach. We're pretending that centralised control of content access is both possible and desirable in a borderless digital world where information flows freely across jurisdictions. The reality is that the internet makes the old censorship model utterly obsolete. Just as we couldn't stop people smuggling banned books across borders in the past, we can't prevent determined users from accessing content regardless of verification systems. Therefore, we should learn from history. The evolution of theatre, film and television regulation shows us that providing information and education ultimately works better than futile attempts at absolute control. The Online Safety Act represents a missed opportunity. Instead of addressing the root cause of harm, lack of education, critical thinking skills and open communication, it focuses on a technical solution that creates privacy nightmares while being trivially easy to circumvent. If we truly want to protect young people online, we need to stop pretending that we can build perfect digital barriers. Instead, we need to equip them with the knowledge and skills to navigate the internet safely. That means honest, comprehensive sex education. It means media literacy that helps them critically evaluate what they see online. And it means creating an environment where they feel comfortable asking questions without shame or judgment. Therefore, the real safety doesn't come from the legislation. It comes from education. What do you think? Is the Online Safety Act addressing the real problem or just creating a false sense of security? Let me know in the comments below. Also, maybe you have some better ideas on how we can solve this problem. You can put those in the comments below as well. Do remember to like and share the video with anybody that you think might be interested in it. And just to say, my name is Andy. I do sex education content on this channel regularly. So why not subscribe so you don't miss anything? You can do that just down there. Thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next video.